The Etheric Double, The Health Aura of Man by A.E. Powell. Welcome, I am Daisy, your hostess. In this video, we will move into the next few chapters where the author explores the concept of Kundalini, also known as the serpent fire, a powerful spiritual energy that resides at the base of the spine within the human energy system. Kundalini, meaning coiled up in Sanskrit, is also related to the practice of all kinds of Hindu Tantra, Tibetan Buddhism, Chinese Qigong, and some Eastern martial arts. For those not familiar with this term, in the field of esoteric studies, Kundalini is said to be one of the forces which emanate from the sun, and this like energy is latent in humans and when activated is said to cause awakening and spiritual transformation within that broader framework of the human energy field and spiritual evolution. Kundalini is a spiritual concept, not a scientific one, even though it seems that the field of science is beginning to take interest in this topic, and you can find many white papers in the National Library of Medicine presenting case studies of its benefits. It is said to be the bioelectrical energy of the physical body and the creative energy of the universe as a whole. For most people, this energy typically operates by itself, well below the threshold of consciousness. In many spiritual traditions, the sun is associated with power, life, and the solar plexus chakra, which is linked to the element of fire and is often visualized as the source of inner fire and motivation. Kundalini, which you will learn more about in the upcoming chapter, is said to be that sleeping fire coiled at the base of the spine, and is thought to be a powerful transformative energy that rises upwards, and its awakening, its activation, is often associated with the sun's qualities of heat and light. It is possible to awaken one's own Kundalini without assistance, yet many sources strongly recommend seeking guidance from an experienced teacher, as attempting to force the awakening can be dangerous and lead to negative physical, mental, and emotional side effects if one is not prepared. And there are actually white papers also discussing those issues. As a side note, practices like Surya Kriya and sun salutations are used in some yoga traditions to support the Kundalini awakening process. Additionally, the author will go into detail regarding the atomic web, which is said to be a complex of network of energetic threads or filaments that form the underlying framework of the etheric double and the physical body. And it's also, he goes on to say that it's like a shield as well. So the etheric body is a replica. And as we learned from the previous chapters in the previous video, the etheric body is a replica of the physical body and is responsible for life functions like health and reproduction, whereas the astral body is tied to feelings, emotions, and consciousness. The esoteric wisdom provided can offer a better understanding of the microscopic energetic architecture that underpins the human form, highlighting its significance in spiritual growth, healing, and the maintenance of well-being. This approach also might give more insights into what animates the human form. If you are a student of esoteric wisdom, you might gain a new perspective regarding the flow of life force or prana as it pertains to health, vitality, and the interconnectedness of all levels of human existence. Again, if you find something that piques your interest, please leave a comment, let me know you stopped by, hit the like button, share this with like-minded people, and subscribe to the channel. I now turn the page. Chapter 13, Kundalini. As we have already seen, Kundalini, or the serpent fire, is one of the forces which emanate from the sun, and is entirely separate and distinct from both Fohat and Prana, being so far as is known, incapable of being converted into any form of these other forces. Kundalini has been variously called the serpent fire, the fiery power, and the world's mother. To clairvoyant vision, it appears in very truth like liquid fire as it's rushed through the body, and the course through which it ought to move is a spiral one, like the coils of a serpent. The name of the world's mother is appropriate because through it our various vehicles may be vivified. An ancient symbol of the spinal column and Kundalini is that of the thyrsus, which is a staff with a pine cone on its top. In India, the same symbols is found, but instead of the staff, a stick of bamboo with 7 knots is used. The knots, of course, representing the 7 chakrams or force centers. In some modifications of the mysteries, a hollow iron rod, said to contain fire, was used instead of the thyrsus. It is said that the modern barber's pole, which is certainly a very ancient symbol, with its spiral bands and a knob at the end, has a similar significance. The modern barber being descended from the ancient chirurgians or surgeons, who also practiced alchemy, a science originally spiritual rather than material. Kundalini exists on all planes of which we know anything, and it also appears to have 7 layers of degrees of force. The astral body originally was an almost inert mass, with only the vaguest consciousness, with no definite power of doing anything, and no clear knowledge of the world which surrounds it. Kundalini was then awakened at the astral level in the center corresponding to the base of the spine center. It moved to the second center near the navel and vivified it, thereby awakening in the astral body the power of feeling, of sensitiveness without definite comprehension. Kundalini then passed to the 3rd spleen, 4th heart, 5th throat, 6th eyebrows, and 7th top of the head center in turn, awakening in each the various powers already described in previous chapters. The mechanism by means of which we become aware of astral happenings is interesting and should be clearly grasped by the student. Although in the physical body we have special organs, each located in a definite fixed part of the body for seeing, hearing, and the rest of an entirely different arrangement as made in the astral body, specialized organs not being necessary for the attainment of the result aimed at. The matter of the astral body is in a condition of constant movement, the particles flowing and swirling about like those of boiling water, and all of them pass in turn through each of the force centers. Each of these centers then has the power of evoking from the particles of the astral body the ability to respond to a certain set of vibrations corresponding to what in the physical world we call vibrations of light, sound, heat, and so forth. When therefore the astral centers are vivified and in working order, they confer these various powers on the whole of the matter of the astral body, so that the latter is enabled to exercise its power in every part of itself. Consequently, a man functioning in his astral body can see equally well objects in front of him, behind, above, and below. The chakrams or centers, therefore, cannot be described as organs of sense in the ordinary sense of that term, though they do convey the powers of sense to the astral body. But even when these astral senses are fully awake, it by no means follows that the man will be able to bring into his physical body any consciousness of their action. He may, in fact, in his physical consciousness, know nothing whatever of it. The only way in which the consciousness of these astral experiences can be brought into the physical brain is by means of the corresponding etheric centers, which must first be awakened and made active. The method of awakening is precisely similar to that adapted in the astral body by rousing Kundalini, which lies dormant in etheric matter in the center near the base of the spine. The arousing is achieved by a determined and long continued effort of the will, bringing the center of the base of the spine into activity, being in fact precisely the awakening of Kundalini. When once this is aroused, it is by tremendous force that the other centers are vivified in turn. The effect of these centers is to bring into the physical consciousness the powers which were aroused by the development of the corresponding astral centers. In order to bring about these results, however, it is necessary that the serpent fire move to the chakram in a certain order and in a certain way, which varies with different types of people. Occultists who understand these matters from first-hand knowledge are always exceedingly careful to give no clue to the order in which the serpent fire should be passed through the centers. The reason for this is on account of the very serious dangers, the gravity of which can scarcely be exaggerated, awaiting those who arouse Kundalini accidentally or prematurely. The most solemn warnings are uttered against attempting anything of the kind until their time is fully ripe, and unless under the guidance of a master or an experienced occultist. Before Kundalini is aroused, it is absolutely essential that a definite stage of moral purity be reached, and also that the will be strong enough to control the force. Some of the dangers connected with the serpent fire are pure physical. Its uncontrolled movement often produces intense physical pain, and it may readily tear tissues and even destroy physical life. It may also do permanent injury to vehicles higher than the physical. One very common effect of arousing it prematurely is that it rushes downwards into the lower centers of the body instead of upwards, resulting in the excitation of the most undesirable passions, which are apt to be intensified to such a degree that it is quite impossible for the man to resist them. In the grip of such a force, he is helpless as a swimmer in the jaws of a shark. Such men become satyrs, monsters of depravity, being at the mercy of a force out of all proportion to the human power of resistance. It is probable that they will attain certain supernormal powers, but these will serve only to bring them into contact with subhuman beings with which humanity is intended to hold no commerce, and to escape from this thraldom may take more than one incarnation. There is a school of black magic which purposefully uses this power in this way, but the lower force centers which in this school are used are always left severely alone by followers of the good law or white magic. The premature unfoldment of Kundalini intensifies also everything in the nature, reaching in fact the lower evil qualities more readily than the good. Ambition, for example, in the mental body is very readily aroused and grows to an inordinate degree. Together with great intensification of intellectual power, there comes abnormal and satanic pride. The force of the Kundalini is no ordinary force, but something resistless. If an uninstructed man has the misfortune to arouse it, he should at once consult someone who fully understands such matters. As the Hatha Yoga Pradipika says, it gives liberation to yogis and bondage to fools. There are some cases where Kundalini wakes spontaneously, so that a dull glow is felt. It may even, though rarely, begin to move of itself. In this case, it would probably cause severe pain, as since the passages are not prepared for it, it would have to clear its way by actually burning up a great deal of etheric dross, a process necessarily painful. In such cases, the force would usually rush up the interior of the spine instead of following the spiral course into which the occultist is trained to guide it. An effort of will should be made, if possible, to arrest such an upward rush, but if that proves to be impossible, as is most likely, it will probably rush out through the head and escape into the atmosphere, probably doing no harm further than causing a slight weakening. It may also cause a temporary loss of consciousness. The really serious dangers, however, are connected not with the upward, but with the downward rush. As already briefly mentioned, the principal function of Kundalini in occult development is to pass through the etheric force centers and vivify these so that they bring through into the physical consciousness astral experiences. Thus, the voice of the silence teaches that a vivification in this manner of the eyebrow centers enables one to hear the voice of the master, that is, of the ego or higher self. The explanation of this is that the pituitary body, when fully working, affords a perfect link between astral and physical consciousness. The mastery of Kundalini as to be repeated in each incarnation, because in each life the bodies are new. But after it has once been thoroughly achieved, repetition becomes an easy matter. The formation of the link between the physical consciousness and that of the ego has its correspondences also at higher levels, meaning for the ego a link with the consciousness of the monad, and for the monad a link with the consciousness of the logos. Age does not appear to affect the development of the chakrams by means of Kundalini, but health is a necessity, as only a strong body can endure the strain. Chapter 14. The Atomic Web. We have already seen that there is a very close connection between the chakrams in the astral body and those in the etheric double. Between these two sets of centers and interpenetrating them in a manner not easy to describe, there is a web or sheath composed of a single layer of physical atoms, closely woven, much compressed, and permeated with a special variety of prana. The prana, which normally comes from the astral into the physical, is such that it can pass with perfect ease through the atomic shield, but the latter is an absolute barrier to all the other forces which cannot use the atomic matter of both planes. Diagram 14. The atomic shield. Function of shield: to prevent astral influences from prematurely entering physical consciousness. Ways of injuring the shield: 1. Emotion shock, e.g. fear, anger. 2. Alcohol. 3. Narcotic drugs, e.g. tobacco. 4. Sitting for development. The shield is thus a protection provided by nature to prevent premature opening up of communication between the astral and physical planes. Were it not for this wise provision, all kinds of astral experiences might pour into the physical consciousness where, in the case of most men, they could be productive of nothing but harm. At any moment, an astral entity might introduce forces which ordinary man would be quite unprepared to meet, and which would be entirely beyond his strength to cope with. A man would be liable to obsession by any astral entity who desired to seize his vehicle. The atomic shield thus serves as an effective safeguard against these undesirable happenings. It also serves under normal conditions to prevent clear recollection of the sleep life from reaching the physical brain consciousness, and it accounts for the momentary unconsciousness which always occurs at death. Occasionally, the returning astral body succeeds in making a momentary impression on the etheric double and dense body, so that when the latter awake, there is a touch of vivid memory. This usually quickly vanishes, effort to recall it rendering success more impossible, as each effort sets up physical brain vibrations which tends to overpower the subtler astral vibrations. It is clear, therefore, that any injury to the shield is a serious disaster. Such injury may occur in several ways. Any emotional shock or any strong emotion of an evil character which produces a kind of explosion in the astral body may produce such an effect, rending apart the delicate web and, as we say, driving the man mad. A terrible fright may do this, or an outburst of anger. Sitting for development, as spiritualists call the process, may also injure the web and throw open the doors which nature intended to keep closed. Certain drugs, notably alcohol and all the narcotics, of which tobacco is one, contain matter which, on breaking up, volatilizes some of it, passing from the physical to the astral state. Students of dietetics, especially those who have studied the effect of toxins, will be interested to learn that even tea and coffee contain the class of material described, though in quantities so small that only after long continued abuse of them would the effect manifest itself. When this takes place, these constituents rush out through the chakrams in the direction opposite to that which they are intended, and after doing this repeatedly, they injure and finally destroy the delicate web. There are only two ways in which this deterioration or destruction may be brought about, according to the type of person concerned and the proportion of the constituents in this etheric and astral bodies. In the first type, the rush of volatilizing matter actually burns away the web and thus breaks down nature's barrier. In the second type, the volatile constituents harden the atom, checking and crippling its pulsations so that it can no longer carry the special form of prana which welds it into the web. The web thus becomes, as it were, ossified, so that instead of too much coming through from one plane to another, we have very little of any kind coming through. The two types are really recognizable. In the former case, we have instances of delirium, tremens, obsession, and certain forms of insanity. In the latter case, which is by far the more common, we notice a general deadening of the higher feelings and qualities, resulting in materialism, brutality, animalism, and loss of self-control. It is well known that those who indulge excessively in narcotics, such as tobacco, will persist in their self-indulgence even at the expense of the pain or discomfort of their neighbors. Their finer susceptibilities have to that extent become blunted. As the consciousness of the ordinary man cannot normally use atomic matter, either physical or astral, there is normally no possibility of conscious communication between the two planes. As, however, he purifies his vehicles, he becomes able to function in the atomic matter and then is able to carry his consciousness along a direct road from one atomic level to another. In this case, the atomic web fully retains its position and activity, permitting the consciousness to pass from one plane to another, while at the same time fulfilling its purpose of preventing close contact with those lower subplanes from which many kinds of undesirable influences are liable to come. The only safe way, therefore, for genuine students of occultism is not to force in any way the development of psychic powers, but to wait for those to unfold, as they will unfold in the normal course of evolution. By this way, all the benefits will be obtained and the dangers avoided. Chapter 15. Birth. It will now be useful to study the etheric double in its connection with the birth and death of the physical body. Those who have studied the mechanism of reincarnation will be familiar with the fact that in the case of the etheric body, a factor comes into play which does not operate in the case of the astral or mental bodies. The etheric double is actually built in advance for the incoming ego by an elemental which is the joint thought form of the four Devarjas, each of whom presides over one of the four etheric subplanes of physical matter. The primary business of this building elemental is to construct the etheric mold into which the physical particles of the new baby body are to be built. The form and color of this elemental vary in different cases. At first, it accurately expresses in shape and size the infant body it has to build. Clairvoyants sometimes see this doll-like figure hovering about and afterwards within the body of the mother, and have occasionally mistaken it for the soul of the coming baby instead of the mold of its physical body. As soon as the fetus has grown to the size of the mold and is ready for birth, the form of the next stage at which it has aimed is unfolded. The size, shape, and condition of the body as it is to be, so far as the work of the elemental concerned, at the time when it proposes to leave it. After the elemental has retired, all further growth of the baby is under the control of the ego himself. In both these cases, the elemental uses itself as the mold. Its colors largely represent the qualities required in the body it has to build, and its form is also usually that destined for it. As soon as its work is done, there is no power left to hold together its particles, and the elemental disintegrates. In determining the quality of etheric matter to be used in building the etheric body, we have two things to consider. First, the type of matter regarded from the point of view of the 7 rays, or vertical divisions, and secondly, the quality of matter regarded from the point of view of its coarseness or fineness, or horizontal divisions. The former, the ray type, is determined by the physical permanent atom, which has the type and subtype impressed upon it. The latter is determined by the past karma of the man, the building elemental being charged with the production of the type of physical body suited to the man's requirements. The elemental, in fact, consists of that portion of the prarabdha karma of the individual which is to express itself in the physical body. On the selection made by the building elemental depends, for example, whether the body will be naturally clever or stupid, placid or irritable, energetic or lethargic, sensitive or unresponsive. The potentialities of heredity are latent in the material ovum and the paternal spermatozoon, and from these the elemental makes his selection according to the requirement of the case. Although the elemental in charge of the body from the first, the ego only comes into contact with its future habitation later, sometime before physical birth. If the characteristics of the elemental has to impose are few in number, it is able to withdraw early and leave the ego in full control of the body. Where, however, much time is required to develop the limitations needed, the elemental may retain its position until the body is 7 years old. Etheric matter for the infant body is taken from the body of the mother, hence the importance of the latter supplying her body with only the purest materials. Unless the elementals is charged with some special development in the way of features, such as unusual beauty or the reverse, the principal agency at work in this direction will be the thoughts of the mother and thought forms which float around her. The new astral body comes into connection with the etheric double at a very early stage and exercises considerate influence over its formation, the mental body also working through it upon the nervous organization. Chapter 16. Death. We have previously seen that, under certain conditions, the etheric double may be separated from the dense body, though it is always connected with it by a thread or cord of etheric matter. At death, the double finally withdraws from the dense body and may be seen as a violet mist, gradually condensing into a figure which is the counterpart of the expiring person and attached to the dense body by a glistening thread. This thread or magnetic cord is snapped at the moment of death. As the Buddhic life web, accompanied by prana, disentangles itself from dense physical matter at death, it draws itself together in the heart round the permanent atom. The atom, web, and prana then rising along the secondary Sushumna nadi into the third ventricle of the brain, thence to the point of junction of the parietal and occipital sutures, and finally out of the body. The life web remains enshrouding the physical permanent atom in the causal body until the time comes for a new physical body to be built. The withdrawal of the etheric double, and with it, of course, prana, destroys the integral unity of the physical body, thus leaving it merely as a collection of independent cells. The life of the separate cells themselves continues, as evidenced by the well-known fact that hairs on corpse will continue sometimes to grow. The moment the etheric double withdraws, and consequently prana ceases to circulate, the lower lives, i.e. the cells, run rampant and begin to break down the heterodefinitely organized body. The body is thus never more alive than when it is dead, but it is alive in its units and dead in its totality. Alive as a congeries, dead as an organism. As Eliphas Levi says, the corpse would not decompose if it were dead. All the molecules which compose it are living and struggle to separate. From Isis Unveiled. When the double finally quits the dense body, it does not go far away but usually floats over it. In this condition it is known as the wraith and sometimes appears to those with whom it is closely bound up as a cloudy figure, very dully conscious and speechless. Unless disturbed by tumultuous distress or violent emotion, the state of consciousness is dreamy and peaceful. It is during the withdrawal of the double, as well as afterwards, that the whole of the man's past life passes swiftly in review before the ego, every forgotten nook and corner of the memory yielding up its secrets, picture by picture, event by event. In these few seconds, the ego lives over again his whole life, seeing his successes and failures, loves and hatreds. He perceives the predominant tendency of the whole, and the ruling thought of the life asserts itself, marking the region in which the chief part of the post-mortem life will be spent. As the Kaushita Kopanishad describes it, at death, prana gathers everything together and, withdrawing from the body, hands everything onwards to the knower, who is the receptacle of all. This stage is usually followed by a brief period of peaceful unconsciousness due to the withdrawal of the etheric matter and its entanglement with the astral body, thus preventing the man from functioning either in the physical or the astral world. Some men shake themselves free from the etheric envelope in a few moments, others rest within it for hours, days, or even weeks, though usually the process does not take longer than a few hours. As the day passed, the higher principles gradually disengage themselves from the double, and the latter then becomes, in its turn, an etheric corpse, which remains near the dense one, both disintegrating together. These etheric wraiths are often seen in churchyards, sometimes as violet or bluish-white mist or lights, but often presenting an unpleasant appearance as they pass through various stages of decomposition. One of the great advantages of cremation is that by destroying the dense body, the etheric body also loses its nidus and so rapidly disintegrates. If a man is so misguided as to wish to cling to the physical life, and even to his own corpse, the preservation of the dead body, either by burial or embalming, offers a distinct temptation to him to do so, and immensely facilitates his unfortunate purpose. Cremation entirely prevents any attempt at partial and unnatural temporary reunion of the principles. In addition, there are certain unpleasant forms of black magic, fortunately rare in Western countries at least, which make use of the decaying physical body. The etheric body of a dead person may also be similarly used in a variety of ways. All of these possibilities are avoided by the wholesome practice of cremation. It is quite impossible for a dead person to feel the effects of the fire on his discarded body, for so long as it is death, the astral and etheric matter have been completely separated from the dense physical. Although it is quite possible for a dead person to get back entirely into his dead body, yet in the case of one who knows nothing beyond purely physical life and is crazy with fear at being entirely cut off from it, it is possible for him, in his frantic effort to keep in touch with physical life, to get hold of the etheric matter of the discarded body and drag it about with him. This may be the cause of considerable suffering, entirely unnecessary, and easily avoided by the practice of cremation. In the case of people who cling desperately to physical existence, the astral body cannot altogether separate from the etheric, and they awaken still surrounded by etheric matter. The condition is very unpleasant, as such a person would be shut out from the astral world by the shell of etheric matter, and at the same time, the loss of physical sense organs prevents him from coming fully into touch with earth life. Consequently, he drifts about, lonely and dumb and terrified, in a thick and gloomy fog, unable to hold intercourse with either plane. In process of time, the etheric shell wears out, in spite of his struggles, though usually not until after he has suffered intensely. Kindly people among the dead and others endeavor to help the class of person described, but seldom with success. Sometimes, a person in this condition may endeavor to get in touch once again with the physical plane through a medium, though usually the medium's spirit guides sternly forbid them access, knowing that the medium runs the risk of being obsessed or maddened. Occasionally, an unconscious medium, usually a sensitive young girl, may be seized upon, but the attempt can be successful only if the girl's ego has weakened his hold on his vehicles by indulging in undesirable thoughts and passions. Occasionally also, a human soul wandering in this gray world may succeed in partially obsessing an animal, those most commonly seized upon being the less developed, cattle, sheep, or swine, though cats and dogs or monkeys may also be used in this way. This appears to be the modern, i.e. fifth race, substitute for the awful life of the vampire found in the fourth race peoples. Once entangled with an animal, it is possible to disentangle oneself only gradually and by considerable effort, extending probably for many days. Freedom usually comes only at the death of the animal, and even then, there remains an astral entanglement to shake off. Chapter 17. Healing. We have already seen that a man in vigorous health is continually throwing off from his body vital emanations which may be absorbed by others. In this way, the latter will be strengthened and minor illnesses may be cured, or at least recover expedited. As however the currents of prana are amenable to the will, it is possible for a man consciously to direct the streams of vitality which pour out of him, as well as greatly to augment their natural flow. By directing the currents onto a patient who is depleted of strength, owing to the fact that his spleen is not doing its work properly, considerable help towards recovery may be given. The additional vitality poured in by the healer keeping the patient's bodily machinery working until it is sufficiently recovered to manufacture supplies of prana itself. The healing of the weak by the strong may thus be achieved, in certain cases, merely by physical proximity, the process being either entirely unconscious and automatic, or it may be assisted and expedited to almost any extent by conscious effort. Much benefit may often be given merely by pouring into the patient copious streams of vitality, which will flood the patient's system with vitalizing energy. Or the operator may direct the flow to the particular portion of the body which is out of health. Merely to increase the circulation of prana is sufficient to cure many minor diseases. All nervous diseases imply a jangled condition of the etheric double, and that is also the cause of digestive troubles and sleeplessness. Headaches are usually caused by congestion, either of blood or of the vital fluid, sometimes called magnetism. A strong current directed by the healer through the head of the sufferer will wash away the congested matter and the headache will disappear. These methods are comparatively simple and by no means difficult to apply, though a skillful healer, especially if clairvoyant, can improve on them enormously. One such improvement, which demands some knowledge of anatomy and physiology, is to make a mental picture of the deceased organ and then image it as it should be in health. The strong thought will mold etheric matter into the desired form, which will help nature to build us new tissues much more rapidly than would otherwise be possible. A still more thorough method is to create the organ in mental matter, then to build it into astral matter, then to densify it with etheric matter, and finally to build into the mold gases, liquids, and solids, utilizing materials available in the body and supplying from outside any deficiencies. A methodical and effective way to set to work to heal magnetically is as follows. The patient assumes a comfortable position, either sitting or lying down, and is instructed to relax as thoroughly as possible. A very convenient method is for the patient to sit in an easy chair with solid flat arms, the operator sitting sideways on the arms and thus slightly above the patient. The operator then makes passes with his hands over the patient's body or over that portion of it which he proposes to treat magnetically, making an effort of will to withdraw from the patient the congested or diseased etheric matter. These passes may be made without actually touching the patient, though it is often an assistance to lay the whole hand on the skin gently and lightly. After each pass, the operator must take care to throw off from himself the etheric matter he has withdrawn, otherwise some of it may remain in his own system, and he may presently find himself suffering from a complaint similar to that of which he has cured his patient. Many cases of this kind are on record, thus an operator may remove pain from patient's tooth or elbow only to find himself presently suffering from toothache or pain in the elbow. In some cases where repeated treatments are given, an operator who neglects to throw off the diseased matter which he has extracted may make himself seriously ill and even become a chronic sufferer. A.P. Sinet gives a curious case of a lady who was cured of chronic rheumatism and then went to live in a part of Europe other than that in which the mesmeric operator resided. 4 years afterwards, the operator died, and the old rheumatic trouble at once returned to the lady with its former virulence. In this case, it would seem that the unhealthy magnetism which the operator had withdrawn from the patient but had not destroyed had for years been hanging around the aura of the operator, and on his death had at once flown back to where it originally belonged. Usually it is sufficient to jerk the hands sharply downwards and away from oneself, or the magnetism may be thrown into a basin of water, the water afterwards, of course, being thrown away. The process may be assisted after this preliminary portion of the treatment is completed by washing the hands in water before commencing the next and more positive part of the treatment. It is also said to be possible to direct the unhealthy magnetism to certain classes of elementals, where it will find its appropriate sphere. The Bible parable of the herd of swine may well be an allegorical description of the process. It would certainly seem to be preferable for something of this kind to be done than for the unhealthy magnetism to be left floating about near the aura, either of the healer or of others who may happen to be near. A slight variation of the above method, especially useful in the case of local congestion, is to place the hands one on either side of the affected area and to direct a stream of cleansing magnetism from the right hand to the left hand, this magnetism driving out the patient's congestion material. The way having been prepared, the next stage is to pour into the patient's own magnetic fluid and prana. This is done by making similar passes, though this time with a strong effort of will to pour out one's own force into the patient. This, as before, may be done by means of long sweeping passes over the whole body, or by shorter passes over a special area, or again, the two hands may be used, the current being passed from the right hand to the left hand through the area that is being treated. The student will readily recognize the desirability of the healer being himself perfectly healthy, because otherwise he is liable to pour into the patient some of his own unhealthy magnetism. It should be noted that in magnetic healing, clothing is somewhat of a barrier, silk being in this respect the worst. The minimum possible, therefore, according to circumstances, should be worn by the patient. From the fact that certain forms of insanity are due to defects in the etheric brain, its particles not corresponding perfectly with the denser physical particles and thus being unable to bring through properly vibrations from the higher vehicles, we may surmise that such cases might lend themselves to cure by magnetic treatment. There are, of course, other methods of affecting the etheric body because the connection between mental, astral, and etheric bodies is so close that any one of the three may affect any of the others. Generally speaking, it may be said that anything which promotes physical health also reacts favorable on the higher vehicles. Unused muscles, for example, not only tend to deteriorate, but produce a congestion of magnetism. This means a weak place in the etheric double, though which unpleasant germs, such as those of infection, may enter. Similarly, mental or astral ill health will almost surely, sooner or later, be reflected as physical disease. A person who is astrally fussy, i.e., who allows his astral body to fritter away his strength on petty little emotions, troubles, and worries, not only is apt to produce unpleasant and disturbing effects on the astral bodies of other sensitive persons, but frequently the perpetual astral disturbance reacts through the etheric upon the dense physical body, and all sorts of nervous diseases are produced. Nearly all nerve troubles, for example, are the direct result of unnecessary worry and emotion, and would soon disappear if the patient could be taught to hold his vehicles still and peaceful. Magnetic healing blends almost imperceptibly into mesmerism, which we shall therefore now proceed to examine. Chapter 18. Mesmerism. The student should recognize the perfectly clear and definite distinction between hypnotism and mesmerism. Hypnotism, derived from the Greek hypnos, meaning sleep, stands literally for the art of putting to sleep. It usually results from a nervous paralysis brought about by a slight strain either to the nerves of the eye or in some other way. it is not, in itself, an injurious state to be in, though it may, of course, be turned to ends either good or bad. It frequently makes the subject insensible to pain, and it may give the system a rest which may be highly beneficial. It is primarily a self-induced condition. Its main result is that it usually places the subject to a greater or lesser extent under the control of the operator who, within certain limits, which vary according to the nature and character of the subject and the degree of the hypnosis, as well as the power and skill of the operator, may be compelled to do what the operator wishes. Mesmerism depends upon quite a different principle. The word itself is derived from Frederick Mesmer, from 1734 to 1815, a doctor of Vienna, who towards the end of the 18th century discovered that he could effect cures by means of influences proceeding from the hand, to which he gave the name animal magnetism. The essence of mesmerism is that the operator drives out or forces back the patient's own magnetism or vital fluid and places it with his own fluid. The natural effect of this is that the patient loses all power of feeling in that portion of his body from which his own fluid has been expelled. We have previously seen that the power of feeling depends on the transmission of contacts to the astral centers through the matter of the etheric double. When, therefore, the etheric matter is removed, the connection between the dense physical body and the astral body is broken, and consequently, there can be no sensation experienced. The withdrawal of the vital fluid does not in any way interfere with the circulation of the blood, for the portion of the body concerned remains warm. It is thus possible to drive out a patient's own etheric matter from, say, an arm or a leg, so that complete anesthesia in the limb results. The mesmeric process being in such a case purely local, the patient will retain full normal consciousness in the brain. All that happens is that a local anesthetic has been applied to the limb concerned. Under such mesmeric anesthetic surgical operations, both major and minor have been performed. Perhaps the best known collection of such operations is recorded in the book Mesmerism in India, first published in 1842 by Dr. Daly. Another surgeon, one Dr. Elliotson, also performed large numbers of operations under mesmeric anesthesia in London about 3/4 of a century ago. At this time, chloroform was unknown, and every operating room was a torture chamber. Graphic and interesting accounts of the work of these two pioneers may be found in The Rationale of Mesmerism by A.P. Sinnett, a book strongly recommended to the student. The mesmeric process may be pushed further to the extent of driving out the subject's own magnetic fluid from the brain and replacing it by that of the operator. In this case, the subject entirely loses control of his own body, and the control passes to the operator, who can then make the subject's body do what the operator wishes. An interesting consequence of replacing a subject's magnetic fluid by that of the operator is that a stimulus applied to the operator may appear to be felt by the subject, or, on the other hand, a stimulus applied to the subject may be felt by the operator. Thus, for example, suppose that an arm has been mesmerized, the subject's own magnetic fluid being replaced by that of the operator. Then, if the operator's hand be pricked, the subject may receive the feeling, owing to the fact that the nerve ether of the operator has been connected to the subject's brain. The subject, therefore, receiving the message from the operator's nerve ether, supposes it to have come from his own nerve ether, and so responds accordingly. This phenomenon is usually known as magnetic sympathy, and many cases may be read of in the literature of the subject. It is not essential to make passes with the hands in order to mesmerize. The only use of the hands is to concentrate the fluid, and perhaps to help the imagination of the operator, anything which assists the imagination, making it easier, that belief upon which the action of the will so largely depends. A skillful mesmerist, however, can manage quite well without any passes whatever, achieving his results merely by looking at his subject and using his will. It would appear that the etheric mechanism of the body consists of two distinct divisions, the one unconscious and connected with the sympathetic, the other conscious and voluntary and connected with the cerebrospinal system, and that it is possible to mesmerize the latter, but not the former. A mesmerist would not, therefore, usually be able to interfere with the ordinary vital processes of a patient's body, such as breathing or the circulation of the blood. This may perhaps be the explanation of the statement in Theosophy that prana exists in two main forms in the physical body: energizing prana in the etheric double and automatic prana in the dense body. As in the case of magnetic healing, it is obviously eminently desirable that a mesmerist should be physically healthy. For a healer or a magnetizer pours into the patient not only prana, but also his own emanations, and in this way it is possible for the operator to convey physical disease to the subject. Further, as astral and mental matter are also thrown into the subject, moral and mental diseases may likewise be transferred. For similar reasons, as a memorist may thus, even unconsciously, gain great influence over his subject, a far greater power than is generally known. Any quality of heart or mind possessed by the mesmerist is very readily transferred to the subject, hence the avenues of possible danger in the respect are apparent. Mesmerism purely for curative purposes by those who understand what they are doing and can be trusted not to abuse their powers has much to be said for it, but mesmerism for other purposes is distinctly not advisable. An advantage possessed by mesmerism over healing of disease by will is that when will forces are poured down into the physical, there is a danger of driving the disease back into the subtler vehicles from which it came, thus inhibiting the final working out to the physical plane of evil, which has its origin in mind and emotion. Curative mesmerism is free from this danger. An interesting example of magnetic or mesmeric healing is the Buddhist parita or piti ceremony, meaning literally blessings, in which the monks sit in a circle or hollow square and hold in their hands a rope about as thick as a clothesline, from which strings run to a large pot of water. Relays of monks recite texts from the scriptures for many days continuously, keeping clearly in their minds the will to bless. The water becomes very highly charged with magnetism, and it is then distributed to the people, or a sick man may hold a thread connected to the rope. It may be noted, in passing, that it is possible to mesmerize plants and procure specific and distinct results in stimulation of their growth. There are probably very few who practice this consciously, at least in Western countries, though the fact that some persons have a lucky hand with plants and flowers, etc., may perhaps be partially explained on the lines indicated. And other bodies, and the relationship of the person to the elementals, the most friendly to him being those whose element is preponderant in his vehicles. Nature spirits, possessing little sense of responsibility and wills not strongly developed, can usually readily be dominated mesmerically, and can then be employed in many ways to carry out the will of the magician. So long as the tasks given to them are within their powers, they will be faithfully and surely executed. It is also possible to mesmerize persons who have recently died and who are still hovering close about us in their astral bodies. Chapter 19, Shells and Shields. There are certain circumstances in which it is both permissible and desirable to form either a shell or a shield of etheric matter to protect oneself or other people from unpleasant influences of various kinds. Thus, for example, in a mixed crowd there is quite likely to be present some physical magnetism distasteful, if not positively injurious, to a student of occultism. Some persons also, being themselves low in vitality, have the faculty, usually unconscious, of depleting others in their vicinity of their stores of prana. Provided these vampire-like people took from others only those etheric particles which are normally expelled from the body as not needed, no harm would be done. But often, the suction is so intense that the whole circulation of prana in the victim is hastened. The rose-colored particles are also being drawn out of the system before either pranic content has been assimilated by their owner. A capable vampire can thus drain a person of all his strength in a few minutes. The vampire is not appreciably benefited by the vitality of which he has robbed others, because his own system tends to dissipate what he acquires without proper assimilation. A person in this condition needs mesmeric treatment, strictly limited quantities of prana being supplied to him until the elasticity of his etheric double is restored, so that both the suction and the leakage cease. The leakage of vitality takes place through every pore of the body rather than through any one portion of it. In certain abnormal cases, another entity may attempt to seize and obsess the physical bodies of others. Or again, it may be necessary to sleep, e.g. in a railway carriage, in close proximity with people of the vampire type or whose emanations are coarse and undesirable. Or the student may have to visit persons or places where disease is rampant. Some people are so sensitive that they are apt to reproduce in their own bodies the symptoms of others who are weak and diseased. Others, again, suffer considerably from the incessant play of the multiplex vibrations of a noisy city. In all these cases, an etheric shell may be utilized with advantage to protect oneself. It is important to note, however, that an etheric shell which keeps out etheric matter will also keep it in, and that therefore one's own etheric emanations, many of which are poisonous, will be kept within the shell. The shell is made by an effort of will and imagination. It may be done in two ways. Either the periphery of the etheric aura, which follows the shape of and is slightly larger than the physical body, may be densified, or an ovoid shell of etheric matter may be manufactured out of the surrounding atmosphere. The latter is preferable, though it demands a far greater exertion of the will and a more definite knowledge of the way in which physical matter is molded by it. Students who wish to guard their physical bodies during sleep by means of an etheric shell must be careful to make the latter of etheric, not astral matter. A case is recorded of a student who made this mistake, with the consequence that the physical body was left entirely unprotected, while he himself floated away in an impenetrable astral shell which permitted nothing to pass either to or from the conscious imprisoned within. The formation of an etheric shell before going to sleep may be of assistance in helping the experiences of the ego to come through into the waking consciousness by preventing the thoughts which are always floating in the etheric world and constantly bombarding vehicles from entering into the sleeping etheric brain and becoming mixed up with thoughts of that etheric brain itself. The etheric part of the brain, being the playground of the creative imagination, takes an active part in dreams, especially those caused by impressions from outside or from any internal pressure from the cerebral vessels. Its dreams are usually dramatic, for it draws on accumulated contents of the physical brain and arranges, disassociates, and recombines these after its own fancies, thus creating the lower world of dream. The best method of remaining whilst awake, practically impervious to the impingement of thought from without, is to keep the brain fully employed instead of leaving it idle, the door wide open for the streams of inconsequent chaos to pour into it. In sleep, the etheric part of the brain is, of course, even more at the mercy of outside thought currents. By the means suggested above, the student should be able to keep himself free from such troubles. In some cases, it is not necessary to make a shell to surround the whole body, but merely a small local shield to guard oneself against a special contact. Thus, some sensitive people suffer acutely merely shaking hands with others. In such cases, a temporary shield of etheric matter may be formed by an effort of will and imagination, which will completely protect the hand and arm from the entry of a single particle charged with undesirable magnetism. Similar shields are used for protection against fire, though for this purpose a far greater knowledge of practical magic is needed. Such shields of etheric matter, the thinnest layer of which can be so manipulated as to be absolutely impervious to heat, may spread over the hands, the feet, or over the hot stones or other substances used in fire walking ceremonies still practiced in some parts of the world. This phenomena is occasionally seen at spiritual seances, the sitters being enabled to handle red-hot coals with impunity. It will of course be recognized that the shells and shields we have been speaking about are purely etheric, and therefore have no effect in keeping off astral or mental influences, for which purpose shells of the material of those planes would have to be employed. With these, however, we are not concerned here. Chapter 20. Mediumship. A medium is an abnormally organized person in whom dislocation of the etheric and dense bodies easily occurs. The etheric double, when extruded, largely supplies the physical basis for materializations. Such materialization forms are usually strictly confined to the immediate neighborhood of the medium, the matter of which they are composed being subject to an attraction which is constantly drawing it back to the body from which it came, so that if kept away from the medium too long, the figure collapses, the matter which composes it instantly rushing back to its source. Such forms are able to exist for a few moments only amidst the intense vibrations of brilliant light. The condition of mediumship is, on the whole, dangerous and, fortunately, comparatively rare. It gives rise to such nervous strain and disturbance. When the etheric double is extruded, the double itself is rent in twain. The whole of it could not be separated from the dense body without causing death, since the life force, or prana, cannot circulate without the presence of etheric matter. Even the partial withdrawal of the double produces lethargy in the dense body and almost suspends the vital activities. This dangerous condition is usually followed by extreme exhaustion. The terrible drain on the vitality, set up by a withdrawal of the means by which the prana is circulated, is the reason why mediums are so often in a state of collapse after a seance, and also why so many mediums eventually become drunkards, stimulants being taken in order to satisfy the terrible craving for support by the sudden loss of strength. Sir William Crookes, on page 41 of his Researches, writes, "After witnessing the painful state of nervous and bodily prostration in which some of these experiments have left Mr. Home, after seeing him lying in almost fainting condition on the floor, pale and speechless, I could scarcely doubt that the evolution of psychic force is accompanied by a corresponding drain on vital force. The condition closely resembles the shock which follows a surgical operation. At a spiritual seance, a clairvoyant can see the etheric double oozing usually out of the left side of the medium, though sometimes from the whole surface of the body, and it is this which often appears as the materialized spirit, easily molded into various shapes by the thoughts of the sitters, and gaining strength and vitality as the medium sinks into a deep trance. Usually, of course, this takes place without any conscious effort on the part of the sitters. It may, however, be achieved deliberately. Thus, H.P. Blavatsky stated that during the remarkable phenomena at the Eddy homestead, she deliberately molded the spirit form which appeared into various likenesses, these being seen by the sitters present. Although etheric matter molded in such spirit forms is invisible to ordinary sight, it may nevertheless be able to affect a photographic plate, the latter being sensitive to certain wavelengths of light which leave the human eye unaffected. This is the rationale of the many cases on record where spirit forms have appeared on the negative of an ordinary photographic portrait. In addition to the matter of the etheric double of the medium, it frequently happens at seances that etheric matter is withdrawn also from the bodies of the sitters. Hence, lassitude frequently felt by those who attend such seances. It is only in conditions of perfect passivity that much matter can be withdrawn from the physical body without danger to life. Although the medium is usually conscious all the time in the background, yet any attempt to assert the individuality or to link connectedly immediately weakens the materialized form, or brings it back to the cabinet. A sudden shock or disturbance, or any attempt to seize the spirit form, is apt to be in the highest degree dangerous, and may even result in death. In addition to the extrusion of etheric matter, in many cases the dense physical matter, probably chiefly gases and liquids, is also removed at the same time from the body of the medium. Many cases are on record where, during a materialization, the body of the medium shriveled perceptibly, the shrunken, wizened appearance of the face being said to be singularly ghastly and unpleasant to see. By actual weighing, the physical body of the medium has been found to be as much as 40 pounds less than normal, whilst the weight of the materialized form has been found to be at least as much as the diminution of the medium's weight, and usually more than this, presumably owing to the extraction of some dense matter from the bodies of the sitters. In one well-known case, a materialized form carried the diminished body of the medium, Mr. Eglinton. To an astral entity who wishes to manifest himself or to produce some phenomenon on the physical plane, a medium serves the purpose of providing the necessary etheric matter, which acts as an intermediary to convey the astral forces into physical matter. A somewhat similar process takes place when a dead drunkard hovering about a gin shop draws round himself a veil of etheric matter in order that he may absorb the odor of the alcohol for which he craves. Being unable to smell alcohol in the same way as we do, he tries to induce others to become drunk, so that he may be able partially to enter their physical bodies and obsess them, thus once more directly experiencing the taste and other sensations he so ardently desires. Sometimes only sufficient etheric is withdrawn from a medium to produce an etheric hand, or even just sufficient of the fingers to hold a pencil and write, or to enable raps to be made, objects to be overturned or moved, and so forth. Usually, etheric matter, as well as dense physical matter, is withdrawn from the medium and utilized as to cover an astral shape just sufficiently to make the latter visible to the sitters, the form seen thus not being solid but merely a thin film. Spirit drapery, however, so usual at seances, is frequently made from the clothing of the medium or a sitter. The texture may be quite coarse or exceedingly fine, finer in fact than any product of Eastern looms. Occasionally, such drapery may be removed from the seance room, sometimes lasting for years, at other times fading away in an hour or so, or even in a few minutes. There can be no question that, except possibly in very rare cases, and where very possible precaution is taken, the practice of mediumship is harmful and may be exceedingly dangerous. Nevertheless, it must be admitted that by its means large numbers of people have acquired knowledge of or believe in the reality of the unseen world and of the continuance of life after death. On the other hand, it may be urged that such knowledge or such belief could have been secured in other and less harmful ways. A trained occultist, for example, connected with any school of white magic, would never interfere with the etheric double of any man in order to produce a materialization, nor would he disturb his own if he wished to make himself visible at a distance. He would simply condense and build into and around his astral body a sufficient quantity of the surrounding ether to materialize it and hold it in that form by an effort of will as long as he needed it. Most spirit guides are well aware of the dangers to which their mediums are exposed and take every precaution in their power to protect the mediums. Even the spirits themselves may occasionally suffer when, for example, a materialized form is struck or wounded, owing to the intimate connection established between the etheric matter of the materialized form and the astral matter of the spirit's body. It is, of course, true that no physical weapon could affect an astral body, but an injury to a materialized form may be transmitted to the astral body by the phenomenon known as repercussion. Owing to the fact that during a materialization matter may be borrowed from all the sitters present as well as from the medium, a considerable intermixture of such matter may take place, and consequently undesirable qualities or vices in any one of the sitters are liable to react upon the others, and most of all upon the medium, who is most drawn upon and is almost certainly the most sensitive person present. Nicotine and alcohol poisoning appear to be especially liable to produce unpleasant effects in this manner. Mediums of low type inevitably attract eminently undesirable astral entities who may reinforce their own vitality at the expense of mediums and sitters. Such a spook may even attach itself to anyone present who is of low development, with deplorable results. Cases are known where some outside entity, either incarnate or excarnate, has seized upon the body of a sleeping man and used it, perhaps in sleepwalking, for his own ends. This would be most likely to happen with a person who is mediumistic. Chapter 21. The work of Dr. Walter J. KILNER. In the book called The Human Atmosphere, 1911, Dr. W. J. KILNER describes the investigations he has made on the human aura by means of colored screens. Dr. KILNER's main principles and discoveries are summarized in this chapter. For further details, especially of the manner of using the screens, the reader is referred to the book mentioned. It is interesting to note that Dr. KILNER expressly disclaims all clairvoyant power and did not even read accounts of the aura until over 60 of his patients had been examined. He claims that his methods are pure, physical, and can be employed with success by anyone who takes the necessary pains. The screens are thin, flat glass cells containing dicyanin, dyes, and alcohol. Various colors are employed for different purposes, such as a dark and light carmine, blue, green, and yellow. The operator looks through a dark screen at the light for half a minute or longer, and then at the patient through a pale screen. When he finds he is able to perceive the aura, use of the screens appears to affect the eyes, at first temporarily and later permanently, so that after a time the operator is able to perceive the aura even without the screens. Great care, however, is advised in using the screens, as the eyes tend to become very painful. A dull, diffused light from one direction only, preferably from behind the observer, should be used generally, sufficient to enable the body to be seen distinctly. A dead black background is usually necessary, though for some observations a white one is required. The person being observed should be about 12 inches in front of the background to avoid shadows and other optical illusions. In addition to the colored screens, Dr. KILNER has employed another ingenious method of investigating the aura, which he terms that of complementary colors. A band of color, 2 inches by 3/4 inch, fairly well illuminated, is looked at steadily for 30 to 60 seconds. This has the effect of fatiguing the powers of the eye to perceive that color, and in addition, the eyes are found to become abnormally sensitive to other colors. When then the gaze is transferred to the patient, a belt or band of complementary color is seen, the same size and shape as the original strip. This specter persists for some little time. In practice, it is found that the color changes in the auras produce the effect of changing the appearance of the CC band. By means, in skillful hands, a number of facts about the aura can be ascertained, which by means of the screens alone would remain undetected. The colors employed by Dr. KILNER are 1. Gamboge, having a CC Prussian blue; 2. Antwerp blue, having a CC Gamboge; 3. Carmine, having a CC transparent emerald green; 4. Emerald green, having a CC carmine. The aura is observed to consist of 3 distinct parts called by Dr. KILNER: 1. The etheric double; 2. The inner aura; 3. The outer aura. The etheric double appears through the screens as a dark band adjacent to and following exactly the contours of the body. Its width is uniform throughout and is usually about 1/16 to 3/16 of an inch. It varies in size with different people, and also with the same person under altered conditions. It appears to be quite transparent and distinctly striated, with very delicate lines of a beautiful rose color, these appearing to tint the portions between the striations. The rose color certainly contains more blue than there is carmine. It seems probable that the lines are self-luminous. Up to the present, no attributes or changes in the etheric double have been found which are likely to be a help in diagnosis. The inner aura commences from the outer edge of the etheric double. though frequently it appears to touch the body itself. It is usually of a uniform width of 2 to 4 inches throughout, though sometimes slightly narrower down the limbs and follows the contours of the body. It is relatively wider in children than in adults. Its structure is granular, the granules being exceedingly fine and so arranged as to appear striated. The striae are parallel to one another, being at right angles to the body and in bundles, the longest in the center and the shortest on the outside, with a rounded margin. The bundles are massed together, thus creating a crenated outline of the aura. The striae have not been observed to possess any color. In ill health, they are less apparent. The inner aura is the densest portion of the aura proper. It is usually more distinctly marked and broader in persons in robust physical health. The outer aura commences from the outer edge of the inner aura and, unlike the inner aura, varies in size considerably. Round the head, it extends usually about 2 inches beyond the shoulders. By the sides and back of the trunk, it's about 4 or 5 inches wide. In front of the body, it is a little narrower. It follows closely the contours of the body, being sometimes a little narrower down the limbs. Around the arms, it corresponds to that encircling the legs, but is generally broader around the hands and frequently projects a long distance from the fingertips. The outline is not absolutely sharp, but gradually vanishes into space. The outer aura appears structureless and non-luminous. The inner portion of the outer aura has larger granules than the outer portions, the different sizes graduating imperceptibly into one another. The auras of boys and girls up to the age of about 12 or 13 appear similar, except that the texture of the female aura is usually finer than that of the male. From adolescence onwards, the male and female auras become distinctive. In both, however, considerable peculiarities occur. The female aura is usually much wider at the sides of the body, the maximum width being at the waist, and it is also wider at the back than at the front, the widest part being at the small of the back, where frequently it bulges out. Dr. KILNER considers that a form approximating to an egg-shaped oval is the most perfect, deviations from this being due to undevelopment. Fineness and transparency may be considered indications of a higher type of aura. Children have auras relatively broader in proportion to their height than adults. Children also, especially males, have an inner aura almost as wide as the outer, so that it may be difficult to differentiate the two. Persons of intelligence usually have larger auras than those of low intellect. This is especially marked around the head. The more gray there is in the aura, the more dull or mentally affected is the owner. Sometimes an exceedingly faint haze can be seen extending outwards a very long distance beyond the outer aura. This has been observed only where the aura is unusually extensive, and it appears probable that it is a continuation of the outer aura. Dr. KILNER calls this the ultra-outer aura. Bright patches, rays, or streams have been observed emanating from various parts of the body. Sometimes they appear and disappear rapidly. At other times, they persist. Patches never seem to be colored. Rays are usually colorless, though occasionally tinted with different hues. Where they occur, the aura usually becomes denser. There are 3 varieties. First, rays or patches, lighter than the surrounding aura, entirely separated from but close to the body, appearing in and enveloped by the aura itself. In their most common form, they are elongated, their long axis parallel with the body. Their sides are usually distinct, exactly coincident with the edge of the inner aura, but the ends, usually contracted and less bright, often fade into the adjacent aura. The inner aura with the ray usually, but not always, loses its striated appearance and becomes granular. The longer the ray persists, the coarser becomes the granules. Second, Rays emanating from one part of the body and running to another part, not very distant. These rays are usually the most brilliant. They may be perceived running, e.g. from the body to an arm, or if the arm be bent, from the armpit to the wrist. If the observer holds his hand near the patient, the auras of both almost invariably become brighter locally, and in a short time, a complete ray will be formed between the hand and the nearest part of the patient. Such rays are formed more easily between points than between surfaces. In one instance, a ray from the hand of one person to that of another was a bright yellow, changing to a liquid ruby color. Third, rays projecting at right angles from the body into space, brighter than and as far as or even beyond the outer aura. The sides of the rays are usually, though not always, parallel and rarely fan-shaped. The ends become pointed and fade away, especially when issuing from the tips of the fingers. Rays have never been observed other than straight. Their normal direction is perpendicular to the body, but they may take any direction, as for example, when flowing from the tips of the fingers of one person to those of another. In addition to the bluish-gray color, red and yellow have been observed to tinge rays. The facts that their structure resembles that of the inner aura and that they have never been observed to diminish the adjacent outer aura, either in density or brightness, justify the conclusion that the rays in the inner aura have a common origin, the body, and that therefore a ray is merely an extended bundle of stria of the inner aura. Dr. KILNER has found also that, under similar conditions, though with more difficulty, he was able to perceive a haze of auras surrounding magnets, particularly the poles, having a bluish color, a yellow aura, around a crystal of uranium nitrate. A bluish aura around the poles of galvanic cells, around any conductor joining the poles, and in the space between the two wires connected each to one of the poles and to one another. From the facts, 1, that the inner aura has a striated structure, whilst the outer aura is entirely nebulous. 2, that the inner aura has a fairly well-marked border and that the outer being ill-defined. 3, that the outer margin of the inner aura is crenated, but that of the outer aura does not in any way correspond. 4, that rays proceed from the inner aura, but in no case have been observed to commence in the outer aura and pass through the inner aura. Dr. KILNER concludes, 1, that the outer aura is most probably derived from the inner, and 2, that the two auras are most probably not the product of one and the same force. Dr. KILNER thus posits 1, number 1 auric force, for short AF, which originates the inner aura, and 2, number 2 auric force, 2AF, which originates the outer aura. 1AF acts apparently very intensely within a prescribed area, though local increase of force rays may be projected consciously by an effort of will. 2AF is more mobile and has a wider range of action than 1AF. It appears to be entirely independent of the will. Different states of health, general or local, act on the forces and through them on the auras, though not necessarily in the same manner on both inner and outer auras. A local affection may cause all the stria to disappear from the inner aura, the latter becoming more opaque and dense, and changing its color. It may also appear roughly rayed in a manner quite different from the fine state of health, or it may form a space devoid of the inner aura. An affection over a large portion of the body may make the inner aura narrower on one side of the body than on the other. This is accompanied by an alteration of texture in the inner aura and often also the color. Variations in the outer aura consequent upon 2AF are less than is the case with the inner aura. The width may contract but never quite disappear, and the color may change. A change over a large area of the body may completely alter the shape of the outer aura. That outer aura may become narrower, the inner aura being unaffected. But if the inner shrinks, the outer also does. Changes in the auras may be produced by disease, In hysteria, the outer aura is wider at the sides of the trunk. Its width contracts suddenly near the pubes. A bulge occurs at the back in the lumbar region. In epilepsy, one side of both inner and outer auras for their whole length is usually contracted. The inner aura becomes opaque, the texture coarser, and striation diminishes or disappears. The color is usually gray. A contraction of the inner aura invariably implies a grave malady. Occasionally, an absolute break in the aura is observed. The inner aura does not alter in shape or size to any great extent, but it changes considerably in texture. The outer aura varies more frequently and more extensively in shape and size, but almost imperceptibly in nature. In case of disease, the earliest morbid symptom is diminution or complete loss of striation. Together with this, the granules become coarser, this being apparently due to amalgamation of smaller granules. Derangement of the inner aura is accompanied by paripasu alteration of the outer aura. The preparation of the eye by means of the screen renders it difficult to appreciate accurately variations in the color of the aura. The color in the main appears to range from blue to gray, the color depending more on temperament and mental powers than on changes in bodily health. The greater the mental vigor, the bluer becomes the aura. Deficiency of mental power tends to grayness in the aura. Dr. KILNER carried out a few experiments which demonstrated not only that rays could be projected by an effort of will from various parts of the body, but also that the color of a ray or a part of the aura could be varied by an effort of will. Red, yellow, and blue colors have been produced in this way. Blue was found to be the easiest to produce and yellow the most difficult. A careful study of Dr. KILNER's results reveals that these agree with considerable accuracy with those obtained by clairvoyance. Dr. KILNER, however, appears to have studied more minutely, in some respects, the structure of the aura and the effects on it of disease. That which Dr. KILNER terms the etheric double is evidently identical with that which is described under the same name as clairvoyance. The striations of Dr. KILNER's inner aura are clearly the same as the health aura. That which Dr. KILNER describes as the outer aura would appear to the present writer to consist of etheric particles from which the prana has been withdrawn and other etheric matter discharged from the body. The students should compare the outlines of auras given in Dr. KILNER's book with plate 14 of the health aura in man, visible and invisible. It would appear legitimate to surmise that further improvement of Dr. KILNER's method would lead to the physical perception of 1. The etheric chakrams, 2. The flow of prana into and through the body, 3. The nature and structure of the etheric double within the body. Dr. KILNER, having referred to the difficulty of perceiving the aura against a background of flesh, the present writer has wondered whether a suitable background could not be obtained by coloring in some way the skin of the person being observed. Dr. KILNER states that his one objective in making his investigations has been to utilize the aura as a means of diagnosis. It is therefore more than probable that further investigations would reveal properties of the aura which, while perhaps having no diagnostic utility, would nevertheless be of scientific interest. From the observed facts, 1. That ill health deranges the aura, 2. That the etheric matter of adjacent auras flows together, forming rays, 3. That such rays can be formed and directed by an effort of the will, 4. That the will can determine even the color of such rays. It would appear but a very short step to the subject of magnetic or mesmeric healing, and it is to be hoped that some investigator will make a study of this important and interesting subject in the same painstaking manner that has characterized Dr. KILNER's own researches. End of chapter. There is still yet more to come. In the next video, we're going to explore magnetization of objects and also the ectoplasm. So please do hit the like button and head on over to the next video.